Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to revisit a favourite album of mine, and we're going to look at the album from October 1977 from the Electric Light Orchestra, Out of the Blue. And I can't quite remember if it was the first album I bought, but if it wasn't the first, it was in the first three. So a very special place in my memories and heart, really. In fact, at the time, I thought it was the greatest album ever, and even now, if I had to do my top 50, it would be in there. Not sure if it'd be quite as high as it was back then, but it comes and goes, this album. You play it a lot, and then you don't play it for a few years, and then you go back to it like a sort of long-lost friend, and you rediscover it all over again. It is just a marvellous double album. Released 28th October 1977. ELO. Otherwise, just to give you a bit of detail, Jeff Lynne was the lead singer and wrote all the songs, and he played the guitar and various other instruments, and Bev Bevan was on drums, Richard Tandy on keyboards, Kelly Groucutt on backing vocals and bass, Mick Kaminsky on violin, and Melvin Gale and Hugh McDowell on cello. So that was the kind of lineup of ELO for this album, and this poster comes with the album, showing those gentlemen there with the dark blue background. So this, I won't call it a concept album, but there's a bit of a blue theme running through it. So the lyrics are printed yellow on blue, as you see there. Just show you the Jet label, which I've always been fond of, which they don't use for the more recent pressings, unfortunately. But I always like that Jet label. And obviously, throughout the album, there's a couple of references to blue. For example, In My Blue World in Turn to Stone, the first track, and then Mr. Blue Sky on side 3. But that's about the only references I can find to the word blue. I like this cover design with the gatefold. Bit reminiscent of 2001 Space Odyssey, the film from 1968. And the artwork, if I can find it, is done by, I can't find it, I'll come back to it. And this is the inner gatefold with a futuristic inside of the spaceship there, and the number on the jet entering the spaceship, GJTLA823 L2, was actually the catalogue number of the record. I thought that was a nice touch. Anyway, it was recorded the songs all came to Jeff Lynne very quickly over a period of a couple of months 3 weeks it was, in the Swiss Alps. He wrote all of these tracks, apparently, and then it took them a couple of months to record it in the Musicland studios in Munich. And just a wonderful studio. This is where they recorded other stuff as well in their career. And the orchestral arrangements and the choral arrangements, which are pretty central to this album. Jeff Lynne, Richard Tandy and Louis Clark, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, sorry. And Louis Clark conducted the orchestra, but the arrangements were by those three. And I just want to say, at the time, getting into music, early 1978, which was when I first really started, obviously the Beatles were not around. They'd split up 8 years previously, and John Lennon was in retirement for a while. We had output from Wings and George Harrison and Ringo Starr occasionally, but this was the next best thing to the Beatles, really. And even John Lennon remarked once that if they want the Beatles, just go and listen to ELO, because they've carried it on wonderfully. And I think he was very complimentary. I haven't heard him talk about this album, but I remember him being complimentary about some of the earlier singles when he was on US radio. I think it was Showdown. So yeah, no surprise that I got into this album, and I just think it's wonderfully produced, and the strings on every track practically, and the choir as well. So it comes with the lyrics, as I say, so you can follow along. The original, not my original copy, but some original copies came with a cut-out spaceship, which I do have in the other room, but I don't really want to get it out because it's a bit fragile. It's almost falling apart, so worth checking out if you can find a copy with the spaceship intact, because that's worth a bit. I managed to find one at the Wimbledon Record Fair few years ago, and I think it was £25 they were charging, and the spaceship was in pretty good shape, but it is a bit flimsy, and if you don't look after it, it'll sort of come to pieces. And in 2017 they came out with a nice picture disc, actually a double album picture disc. I'm just showing you disc 1. Disc 2 shows the interior of the spaceship, so that was nice. I'm not going to play, I haven't played that copy, that was just to put on the wall. I just took it down off the wall to show you for this video. So 4 singles off this album. Actually, I was reading it's the first album in the UK, double album in the UK, to generate 4 top 20 hit singles, which is quite interesting. Turn to Stone was the lead-off single in October 77 and didn't do that well. It got to number 18 in the UK, number 13 in the US. But the album, I always associate this album more with 1978 than 77. It's a bit like Thriller from Michael Jackson. One associates that with 83 versus 82 because that's when the hit singles were all over the charts, and Mr. Blue Sky was released in January 78, the second single, and pretty effortlessly reached number 6 in the UK, although a disappointing 35 in the US. And that song came to Jeff after days of rain in the Swiss Alps and mist covering the mountains. He woke up one morning and the sky was blue and the sun was shining and all the mountains were visible, and it put him in a good mood for that song, and it is a very uplifting song to this day, albeit with a slightly troubled last verse about Mr. Knight coming along and ruining the party. Sweet Talking Woman was another big hit single released on the heels of Mr. Blue Sky, again reaching number 6 in the UK charts, number 17 in the US, and then a 4th single, Wild West Hero, reaching number 6 in the UK. I don't think it was released in the US. It's Over released in the US but only made number 75. So Wild West Hero, I remember someone playing that at school, just so that everyone could hear it, and he just played it on repeat, and that it really got into my brain. It's the kind of song which one can listen to repeatedly and not get bored of. I certainly have never got bored of that song, and it's a beautiful song with beautiful chords, nice one to play, and lovely sentiment to the lyrics. So I just want to give a shout out to the rest of the band, because everyone thinks of ELO as just Jeff Lynne, but Cali Graucourt in particular contributes massively to the sound on this album, not only with his bass playing, but more particularly with his backing vocals. He's actually credited as co-lead singer on Sweet as the Night, the opening song of side 4, but he's all over this album. And when Jeff Lynne rather unkindly said, I didn't think that we'd recorded Out of the Blue very well, so he redid a few of the songs, not only from Out of the Blue, from his other albums for an album quite recently. I think a lot of fans would disagree with Jeff that a good job was not done production-wise on this album. I certainly would. In particular, he singles out his vocal on Steppin' Out and says it's... he said he really messed up on that track, and the vocal is incredibly fragile. Well, I love it. I'd never had a problem with it. And he re-recorded a version with Richard Tandy for this album I was telling you about, and it's okay, but it's not as good as the original, sorry. And I think I would say that for any of the songs which Jeff has tried to re-record, and give me the original any day. Anyway, go back to the songs. Well, it starts off just in storming fashion with Turn to Stone. Great single, should have been a bigger hit. Then It's Over. It was released as a single in some territories, but it's a really catchy track and gets the album off to a good 1-2 punch. And then Sweet Talking Woman follows straight after that. So you got 3 sort of hit single material songs leading off the album in wonderful fashion. Sweet Talking Woman, just an infectious song. I won't label it by calling it anything in particular. It's just very catchy with great vocals and overdubbed backing vocals. Cross the Border is an interesting track with nice violin from Mick Kaminski at the beginning and the sound of a train. It was never been one of my favourites, to be honest. And I remember one guy at school, I forget his name, but he said this was his favourite track on the album. So Horses for Courses, I've never thought it was wonderful, but it's a bit too kind of rock and roll-y, sort of generic song for me. But nice production and nothing wrong with it. Night in the City kicks off side 2, and this is really a storming opener with the hilarious kind of sound of the traffic, which Richard Tandy gets on his keyboard. And then the guitar comes in. And just standing at the airport looking down the strip. She was drying her eyes, she was biting her lip. I just loved the lyrics and just loved the chorus to the song, and just a good sound, great guitar. And Starlight, inspired unsurprisingly by a starlit night in Switzerland when Jeff was writing the songs for the album. And very nice it is too. Starlight. Jungle is, I was reading it, divides opinion, but I don't think it divides opinion in my household. I think everyone loves it. Just a thoroughly infectious, sort of fun song with jungle rhythms, and just great. And I remember one friend at school, again, this was his favourite song on the album. So it's interesting how different people have different favourites. But that was Malcolm Drysdale's favourite, I seem to remember. Believe Me Now is a short instrumental, wonderful. And then Stepping Out, I referred to earlier, Jeff Lynne's not happy with his vocal. I don't think there's anything wrong with the production or the vocal or the melody or anything. I think it's one of those songs which Jeff Lynne should be extremely proud of, and it's a 10 out of 10 song, and it's a 10 out of 10 production for me. And again, another one nice to play on the piano. And then we turn over to side 3 and we get Concerto for a Rainy Day. And I was reading some retrospective review which said, we can do without Concerto for a Rainy Day. And then he went on to talk about how good the singles on side 1 were. Excuse me? I mean, Concerto for a Rainy Day is probably ELO's finest achievement, bar none. I think it's absolute masterpiece. And Standing in the Rain, it starts off as an instrumental for the first couple of minutes, and then Jeff comes in on the vocal. I'm standing in the rain and waiting all alone. I'm so tired and want to go home. Standing in the rain, getting soaking wet and doing my best, but what do I get? And then the last, it builds to a crescendo with wonderful keyboards from Richard Tandy all the way through, and good playing from the whole band, and then the good intentions and the pain lay drowned now in the pouring rain. I tried to be so good this time, but here I am under the sky. So it's kind of using the rain as a kind of, okay, it's sometimes perceived as negative, but in this song, it's almost like a release. It's, he's getting soaking wet, but he's doing his best, and he's just getting on with things and just trying to be optimistic. And I've always found it a very uplifting track, and it leads into Big Wheels, which is one of Jeff Lynne's most gorgeous ballads ever. I've been thinking it over so many times. They say you got it made. They never understand the answer lies within your soul, because no one knows which side the coin will fall. Big wheels turning. And then just building up to this superb chorus. Remember the dead of night, a lonely light that shines upon the window. I see it all so clear, the tenderness, the silent tears. Out here in the pouring rain, through cold, dark, waiting days, I see you standing there. I see the big wheels turning, never ending. On and on they go. Just an absolutely brilliant song, and then leads into Summer and Lightning, as if this side could get any stronger. I mean, all 4 songs are just 10 out of 10, and it's just a lovely, great beat at the beginning. I've waited for your love for so long. How do I go on? And then I love the bit in the middle where it just stops, and it's just the percussion with playing for a few seconds. And then after Summer and Lightning, great backing vocals again, by the way, which I think is shared by Jeff Lynne and Kelly Grauke, but I'm going to mention Kelly again because I think he's central to the sound. Mr. Blue Sky finishes off side 3, a fitting end for Concerto for a Rainy Day. The clouds have broken up and the sun has come out, a bit like in George Harrison's Blow Away, and everything's good and optimistic. Sun is shining in the sky, there ain't a cloud in sight. It stopped raining, everybody's in a play, and don't you know it's a beautiful new day. And it's so uplifting to this day, just a wonderful track. And then you turn it, so you've got a pretty damn good first 3 sides, and quite often on double albums, side 4 is a little bit of a letdown. So relatively speaking, for example, Pink Floyd The Wall, I can think, is a good example of that. A slight letdown, shall we say, but on this album, not a bit of it. Sweet Is the Night is one of my favourite tracks from the whole album, in fact from their entire career. When the day is done and there's nowhere to run and people of the city have all lost and won. In your city dress, You stand and stare, and you smoke another cigarette and comb your hair, and the light that shines paints a trace of sadness on the street, and I wait, and I can't seem to get to you. But it's a happy ending, this song. Sweet, sweet is the night, now you are here. Dark, dark were the days, they disappear. It's just wonderful. Birmingham Blues The Whale, it's not listed here because there's no lyrics, but it's a wonderfully atmospheric instrumental. Not everyone's cup of tea, but a good one to play on headphones, someone was saying, and I don't do that very often, but no doubt that's true. And then, so nothing wrong with that. And then Birmingham Blues is a really fun rocker about being homesick, being on the road and being homesick, wanting to get back to Birmingham, which is where Jeff and most of the band come from. Certainly Jeff and Bev Bevan come from there anyway. I love that song. It's a kind of deep cut, should we call it, because it was never a single and not included in any compilations, but it's just very well sequenced, this album, that it follows The Whale with this rocker, Birmingham Blues, and then finishes off the album with Wild West Hero, which is just a gorgeous... Sorry if I've used that word too much on reviewing this album, but it is a gorgeous melody. Sometimes I look up high, and then I think there might just be a better life. Away from all we know, that's where I want to go, out on the wild side, and I wish I was a Wild West hero. Just a wonderful end to the album. Unfortunately, some of the critics didn't like it. All Music Guide called it an overblown something or other, masquerading as something important. Sorry, I couldn't remember the word they used to describe, but it was something along those lines. And then Rolling Stone rather ungraciously said, a lack of passion in the work, totally uninteresting and horrifyingly sterile package, all method and no madness, perfectly hollow, bland rock music. Excuse me, oh dear. The Guardian gave it 3 stars. Axl Rose is on record as saying it's an awesome record, which I was pleased to see. So it's a little bit sort of snootily regarded by critics and unloved for some reason, perhaps because ELO is not trendy, and a bit like Supertramp and 10cc, I think a bit unloved by critics. So you won't find this album very high in any kind of top albums of all time, although if I did my top, it would be certainly in the top 50, if not a lot higher, probably in the top 30 actually. It depends on the time of day. Sometimes I have New World Record from ELO ahead of this one. It just depends what mood I'm in. But if push comes to shove, it's a bit like the White Album has got to take the nod from the Beatles as being their best album, just simply because there's so much music on it. And I think I would have to go with Out of the Blue as ELO's sort of tour de force, along with New World Record. I think Jeff Lynne singles out those two, and I think he's right. But unlike Jeff Lynne, I think there's nothing wrong with the original production. I think it's a really good group effort, wonderfully recorded in Munich with Lewis Clark helping a lot on the orchestral arrangements. And so it's an album I come back to a lot, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.